This is Rob Temper for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. Delighted, as always, to be joined by Kalle Sauerland. It's the morning after the night before Daniel Dubois versus Joyce last night. First and foremost, Kalle, how are you doing?
How are you, Rob? How are you, mate? You well? You had a good boxing Saturday night?
I'm well, mate. I've had two very late nights back to back, which is why I'm looking even more haggard than usual today.
I've got to admit, there's been quite a few fights this weekend. I only watched so far. I've recorded them, so I'll go back and watch some other ones today. But the only one I did see was for me the big one was the Joyce Dubois fight, of course. You know, but big weekend of boxing, eh? Very
much so. Very big weekend of boxing. I'll recommend you watching the Jacobs-Rosado fight if you're struggling to sleep, Kalle.
Yeah, okay. But so I've got paint drying as well, so it's a toss-up, you know.
I think you watch that first.
Yeah. I do like watching Jacobs, so I probably will watch it, but I don't know. I've got it on record, so we'll see. We'll see if I find a time on lockdown Sunday. I'm sure I'll find an hour to squeeze it in while I'm washing the hair.
Yeah, good luck with that one. Right, let's talk about Daniel Dubois versus Joyce. Huge heavyweight fight, big hype. Did it deliver for you?
I thought the fight was okay. I thought it was fascinating to go watch it and look at the strategies and the different things that went. As a sporting fight, if you didn't know what it was and what it was for and the stories around it and the situations, it weren't that great a fight. It was okay. But it was exciting. It was excitement, and it was, you know, I said before the fight, my prediction was Joyce late. I'm not going to crow about it because I do think that Dubois has got a future. It's not one of those fights. He would have to go away and learn from it. The ending was bizarre, absolutely bizarre at that stage of the fight. I had Dubois up on points at that stage. You could make an argument either way. It was I think it was the third and the fourth round that was so close that you could give it either way. I gave them to Dubois at the time. If I look at it back, maybe I look at it to Joyce. That would swing it the other way exactly for Joyce being ahead at the time of the stoppage. But basically, if you look at it, it was, you know, my prediction was exactly what came out of it. It was too deep, too soon, too early. And forget the whole fight. Just the first round is what I would tell the viewers to focus on. The first round. You see what it means to raise the level in this sport and get stage fright. That first round was stage fright. You saw Dubois came out. He was still cold. He wasn't moving. You know, he wasn't peppering the jab. And it was Joyce, who hasn't got a spectacular jab, but he was all over him with it. He was on the front foot, pushing him on the back foot. Dubois is one hell of a unit. Those units, you know, I was commentating on Twitter, and I just put, a unit don't go 12 rounds very often in our sport. And he didn't look like he was going to go 12 rounds from the first bell. He's one hell of a physical unit. To carry that through 12 rounds in war, I've rarely seen done in our sport. In fact, at that size, I haven't. You know, so it was clear he would have to take his tactics early. And for me, the first round was the round where you stamp it. You know, and that is something that I'm sure it's been a 12-month training camp. It must be something that they played out. That first round, push, go out there. You know, Mike Tyson, not the Mike Tyson of last night, but the Mike Tyson of 30 years ago. You know, Daniel's got that about him. He's got that size, you know, so you just expect him to go at it. You know, that's his style as well. And Joyce never for me seemed in a bad place. He was behind on my card, but I always, and I wrote that also on my Twitter feed, I said, he's behind, but this is his territory now. You didn't feel at one point, even when Dubois did connect certain punches, especially the right hand, you never felt like Joyce there was not a single instance where I felt that he took a step back. He felt like, you know, he was worried or he was in an uncomfortable place. And the big part is he's 23 years old, Dubois. He's got no amateur pedigree. He's come out of a very, very very, very good system out of the Dell Youth, one of the best systems in the world. You know, it's a great athletes coming out there. Just think about DeGale and Groves, of course. But he hasn't got that thing about him yet where you know what he is. He's not the entire thing. And I said before the fight, it's a tough one to call because Dubois might come out and do the superstar act, you know? And if he would have done that last night, you know, I'm sure certain people will be crowing about it and saying, oh, we told you all, you know, you didn't believe in him. But that's a hell of a risk to take. It's not a calculated risk. Boxing is all about calculated risks when you make matches. For me, that last night there was too many unknowns for Dubois going into that fight. There wasn't the 12 rounds on pedigree that we'd seen. You know, we haven't seen him go to those, you know, and you need some sort of background to go into a fight. When you know a guy like Joyce, what are his assets? He's physically immensely strong, great chin. He'll take you into the trenches, into the distance, you know. So if you're going to do that, you've got to realise, even with the strength and power of Dubois, you know, what happens if that doesn't have an effect? And we know Joyce has got a huge chin. We know that. We knew that before the fight. So if you're not sure you're going to get him out of there early, you've got to be prepared to go for the 12 rounds. I didn't think at one stage in the early stages that there was any chance that he could do that physically on the 12. You know, to be at peak condition going into the championship so-called rounds and still be firing if it was a toe-to-toe. No. And you know, it's always easy to sit on the outside and say, wow, he should have taken a fight before, but he should have. He never had that step up. You know, there wasn't the step in between fight. There's other fighters who don't need to do that because they've been there and done it before. Joyce, you know, if you look at where he started in his career, he started with a 10 round against Lewinson. Listen, that's a tough fight as a first fight for anyone. But Joyce had been there, you know, he's fought the Jokers, the Hrgovićes, all these tough guys many times over many years in the WSB. And listen, amateur and pro, of course, are different, but the delta between the sports, amateur and pro, is also rapidly decreasing. It's not the days of, you know, 3 rounds with powder puff punches and whatever. Those are proper physical fights in the WSB, you know. And I'm not a fan of it. I don't think it's a good thing because I think amateur needs to be a different type of a sport. But that's what it is at the moment. That's his background. So, you know, he's been there. He knew the deep end, and that was the difference last night. You know, it wasn't a step too early. It was a massive, gigantic leap too early. But he can come back. You know, it was a very strange finish. You know, I thought Carl Frampton's commentary was very good on it. You know, at that level, you have got to be prepared to do everything. And being ahead on the scores, you know, at the time, and I don't know, he said he didn't know what the scores were. Okay, but that's fair. He shouldn't know what the scores are, but maybe the corner should have said to him, look, you're probably nicking this. You could be, you know. So yeah, I mean, the craziest thing in the whole night though was the judge with the 8 rounds. You know, or was it
five rounds up? I think it's been tallied now. He was 5. He had him 5.
It's still a tough one.
Still too much, but
it's still too much, but better than the 8. I read that and I thought, oh, okay, here we go. But no, as a whole, Joyce goes on to big fights from there. Big fights from there. And Dubois, not the end of the world. You know, he's a good kid. He's got good people around him. I think he can definitely come again, but he's going to need that 2-3 years. David Hayes said as well, when he had the Thompson disaster, took him 3 years from that point on to become world champion. You know, so he's got to realise it's a rebuilding stage. What you make out of it afterwards, you know. That's the testing ground. But I still think that he can go a long way in this sport. He's got all the attributes, but he needs to fight his fight and not someone else's fight, which he did last night.
You mentioned kind of the bizarre ending to the fight. Is that the most worrying thing about last night? Not necessarily the fact that he was able to be backed up, not necessarily the stage fright. Was the end of the fight, the fact that he took a knee, the fact that by all intents and purposes he quit the fight? Is that the most worrying thing moving forward?
I think only he knows what happened there. And that will, I'm sure, be changed by how it's sold to him by people around him, by what people say to him. Only he will know, you know. Did he forget what the rules were at that moment? Did he, you know, all these things are possible. Don't laugh, people, because I've seen it before. I've seen a fighter, I'm not going to say who, it's too embarrassing, because he said to me at the press conference, world title fight, he got stopped by the ref. He was down, he got back up, and then the ref sort of jumped in. He goes to me at the press conference, he goes to me, why did he do that? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the ref can't tell me when to stop. Only I can say when to stop. I said, no, the ref is there to protect you, my friend. Yeah, that was at world title level. I don't know if it was just the adrenaline, whatever. It's his moment. It's not a team decision in that moment. You know, he clearly couldn't see out the eye. He took a knee. I don't know if he thought, give me a second, I need to refocus and I'm going to stand up. Did he miss the count? I don't know what it was, but he took a knee, which, by the way, isn't quitting. It's taking a boxing sort of timeout, yeah, within the rules, but he didn't comply with the rules. He sort of, you know, just stayed down. So then, is it quitting on paper? Yes, but only Daniel Dubois knows what happened in that moment, you know. So I'd say let's not grinding out too much. You know, he is 23 years old. You know, that's a long time still to make good. Not a question mark after last night, but you know, it's been question marks of great athletes in boxing before, and you know, it's all about now for him, you know, going and looking at those question marks, not ignoring them, not listening to the yes people, but going forward and making the best of it.
Now you've dealt with fighters for a number of years. You're from a boxing family. You know, the way that Daniel Dubois had been sold since he turned over as a professional was that you know, there was talk of him wanting to break Mike Tyson's record. There was talk of him as the heir apparent to the throne. He was going to be the big devastating knockout artist of a generation. Now he's had this defeat. Now the bubble has been burst, so to speak. Could this potentially work out better for him in the long run? The fact that he's not got that pressure to deal with anymore. He can go away, he can rebuild away from the public eye, and as you say, work on the things that he feels that he needs to work on.
Yeah, but I mean, if people drawing similarities to arguably the best fighter ever, that's one. Then listen, Daniel can become a world champion still, but he's not Mike Tyson. There was only one Mike Tyson, so those comparisons for me are not valid. You know, they never were valid. What's clear is he's been rushed. This fight was a rushed fight. It wasn't the fight to make at the time. Now, that's not a criticism. Sometimes I've made fights, we've all made fights as promoters, which were the wrong fights at the time. You've got to take that risk sometimes, but you can reduce the risk with calculated, you know, take steps in between. We've gone from sort of the 1 meter 50 end of the pool to the 4 meter end of the pool with nothing in between. And there, I think they look back and say, okay, we tried it, you know, and once again, as a fighter, you can't turn it, you've got to give Dubois credit for taking the fight and believing in himself to take the fight, you know, and it is prize fighting. I'm sure they both got paid very well last night. So that's what it's about. But once again, the hype around him was not unfounded, but it was also massively overdone. I mean, you know, he's done sparring with some of our guys. I know he's good, without question. He's good, but he's a learning fighter still. You know, so you got to give him learning fight. He will have learned a lot from that fight last night, by the way. But it was maybe too much learning in a fight. But it was because, I mean, he didn't pass the exam. But you know, hopefully he will come back. But I think all the hype around it was far too much. And I think far too much for the kid as well. I mean, his age to walk around with that as a, you know, that's a huge weight off his shoulders in a way, you know, and I hope he goes back to the drawing board and gets the fights that he needs to get to that place and take it step for step, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of what I was saying there. I feel like now that he doesn't have that kind of that cloud over him and that pressure, that potentially it may do him some long-term good if he can get the right fights and rebuild in the right way. Right, before I let you go, Kalle.
Rob, just as a second, we've seen it. We have seen it before when fighters. I'm just thinking about Audley Harrison, very different example, gold medalist, and he got this huge TV deal with BBC. He had to go off and fight fights that you never would have done early on. He was headlining the card. You can't headline the card and box Banana Man. You can maybe do it once, but you can't do it 5, 6 times. So he was thrown in the deep end. Did that ruin his professional career? I think so. I think so. You can't say that Audley Harrison wasn't a good fight. He won the gold medal fair and square in Sydney, and he was the man to beat at the time for coming through. It was the gold medalist. That's why BBC very famously put all their eggs in the one basket, and you know, what a massive mistake from a broadcaster as well to invest in that way, in such an uncontrolled way. And I just feel, I think he's got to go back, maybe box on the undercards a bit, you know, get through and learn.
Okay, Kalle, before I let you go, what next for Big Joe? Obviously, going into this fight, the Usyk potential for the WBO, potential vacant WBO. There's your man, Filip Hrgović. They've got history. There's been talk about that. Yeah. Joyce versus Tony Yoka, who returned on Friday night against Christian Hammer. Where would you like to see him go next, Kalle?
I think the names you just mentioned, I think they're all good fights. From a Hrgović perspective, immediately, great fight. Why not? But I mean, Joe's done the business last night. Let's be fair. Yeah, he's done the business, so he can, you know, he could say he's up there now. You know, he's talked the talk and he's walked the walk. You know, so he's in a good place. He's now up there with the main challengers. You know, that's for sure. So, you know, but when you get up there, you're a scout then, aren't you? All of a sudden, you turn around from being the hunter to the hunted. And, you know, he deserves credit for what he did last night. His strategy was execute to perfection, absolute perfection. And I think they've done a good job moving. I think Sam Jones has done a good job matching him. I think it's a good team he's got around him. He seems a lovely guy as well. Very relaxed, you know. And that helps in heavyweight boxing. When you're that relaxed around fights, you don't burn that nervous energy off, you know. And if you look at them, just look at the way they both got into the ring, completely different mindsets, you know. One very tense and very nervous, and the other one, he seemed calm, cool as ice from the get-go.
He certainly did, and it was an entertaining spectacle. Kalle, as always, real pleasure catching up with you. Thanks.
One last thank you, Rob. Thank you so much for not wasting my time on a Sunday and asking me anything about the other fight from across. Well, I wouldn't call it a fight, but that other thing that went on last night. Didn't watch it. I just caught up with. It was like a snapshot of the different things. I'm going to donate my £20 that I saved to charity today, and crikey. On that note, happy Sunday, and we'll speak soon, Rob.
We certainly will, Kalle. Always a pleasure. Thanks very much for speaking to Boxing Social. Take care.
Take care.